Welcome. My name is John Pack. I'm the vice chair of the Carson City Republican Party, and I'm here with my colleague Lucia Maloney and Julie Butler, who's running for Nevada State Assembly District-40. So, Julie, we're just going to ask some wide-ranging questions about the office and the position and get your thoughts on it. And so, first, delve right into it. The first one is, what inspired you to run for Nevada State Assembly?
What inspired me to run, it's really been a combination of things over the last couple of years. Some of you have seen me talk in front of the club events. You know that I've retired in the last couple of years. And when every day is a Saturday, it just kind of loses its meaning, and I've determined that I don't sit well. And then just kind of this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I'm kind of meant to do more than just sit on the sidelines. Right. I really feel that I have a skill set that can be useful. And what really pushed me over the edge was the Charlie Kirk assassination. And I just one of my sons was so distraught, and I was very upset. And I thought, I can't just sit on the sidelines anymore. It really felt compelled to get involved. That was kind of a pivotal moment for me.
Sure. Very good. And how has your professional and personal background prepared you for this role?
I think my professional and personal background has prepared me very well for this role. So I spent 30 years working for the executive branch of state government in successive leadership positions. So I was the head of a division for 13 years in Department of Public Safety, and then I was the director of DMV for the last 5 years. In those capacities, you have to understand the complexities of running a big operation, and people say, well, it's not private sector experience, but I still had many of the same concerns. You've got to acquire the talent, there's IT, there's building insurance, there's building maintenance, there's insurance, all the things, equipment, all the kinds of things that you would encounter. It's just I had a different board of directors and CEO, right? My CEO was a governor, my board of directors was the legislature. So I'm very familiar with that process, and also I've written bills, I've lobbied them through, I've implemented them. So I've got a really good relationship with many of the legislators, many of the lobbyists. So I really feel I can be effective on day one, and I don't really have a huge learning curve. So I think that's how it's prepared me.
That's great, thank you. Moving on to some district-specific issues. District 40 has experienced significant population growth. What are you looking to do to address the strain on infrastructure such as roads, schools, and public services?
That's a great question. One of the things that that has, I wouldn't say bothered me necessarily, but I think gets lost in the conversation about how we need to grow, and it's not that I'm anti-growth. I'm not. We need to grow, or we decay and fizzle out. So we need to grow, but we need to do so with those things in mind. So anytime we're looking at things like property tax abatements or incentives to attract businesses here, I think we need to have those serious discussions about the impact to schools, to roads, to power, to water, to all the infrastructure things on the front end, because it's a lot easier to build those considerations in on the front end than it is that, oops, we forgot, and tack it in on the back end, and now we've got a situation like you've got heading out I-80, on any given weekday morning with the construction that's going on at Trick. That's going to be a harder nut to solve, rather than if we maybe looked at that at the beginning of, well, what are some of the traffic mitigations we could do? So I think it's very similar. I think we just need to, in terms of the legislature, be a lot more proactive in working with the city supervisors and kind of understanding the master plan and where we're going.
Fantastic. And are there any specific infrastructure projects or programs that you would like to see prioritized during your first term?
Well, our roads definitely need a whole bunch of attention. That one's tough because what we want to do with the gas tax, it really is going to take state involvement in terms of the overall what the fuel taxes are funding versus what the costs of construction are, and the inflationary pressures that have gone along with the highway fund. I would love to see that addressed. Whether or not there's an appetite to do that at the legislature. I was part of a study a few years ago where we looked at the growing hole in the state highway fund. At the time that I left a couple of years ago, it was $550 million between what the highway fund the demand on the projects versus what the revenues were coming in. It's probably a lot greater at this point.
Right.
So whether or not there's an appetite to do something about that needs to be seen.
And as you know, water is a big concern for Nevada, and water and the scarcity of it, or how you handle it. What policies would you support to ensure sustainable water management for District 40?
Well, I think there's already a growth, like a cap on the growth here. I think there's supports maybe 75,000 residents, something like that, I think, in the overall scheme of things for District 40. But I think, doing certain things like looking at landscaping, what are we using materials, and Vegas passed an ordinance a few years back about not having grass in the yards as a way to conserve water. Do I want to see something like that? It's like, the grass is pretty.
Yeah.
But at the same time, are there things that we can do that just, that minimize the water use? Can we encourage different, alternative landscaping? Looking at, the trees and things that are planted here, how much water do they suck up? What are we doing in terms of our aesthetics, but also to keep it realistic, for available water that we get.
Okay. And how would you support small businesses and attract new business to the district from your position in the legislature? What would you need to see? What would you like to see enacted to help?
Well, definitely think the looking at the regulatory environment and making sure that it's business friendly. And so, are there laws, are there regulations that we can look at that hinder businesses? Are there things that would attract businesses? Like, one of the things that I'm proud of, working at, or formerly working at DMV is, we were actually repealed some of those regulations and looked at some of the outdated regulations and laws. At DMV, we regulated the automotive industry, of course, and so, things like that. One of the governor's first executive orders was looking at regulations statewide and what could be repealed, and I think there's more work to be done. Nevada still, we have some 300 something boards and commissions. I know a lot of those were looked at, but I think, again, there's still more to be done. And also things that looking at, like occupational licenses. Do we need to regulate as many of them as we do? So certain things like that, just making sure we're not overly regulated.
Sure.
Is education a part of your platform, and if so, what are your legislative priorities related to education in District 40?
Education is one of my priorities, and one of the things that I really want to look at is fostering interest and, I guess, redevelopment of the trades, the building trades in our education. I think one of the things that has been a disservice to young people growing up, and then to our overall economy, is the overemphasis in the last 20, 30 years on college being the only route to a successful self-sustaining career. And college. Well, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's interested. In my own son's life, he went into the Marines right out of high school. He had zero interest in taking the ACT, yet it was mandated. And there's a lot of kids like that would like to work with their hands, or maybe they're going to go in the military. And so I would like to foster a re-emphasis on the trades, involving the community colleges, involving the building associations, involving the trades unions, to see if we can develop a pipeline of ready-made people to go into those careers, because we need it.
Yes. And follow up on that is, what is your opinion about teachers unions and school choice and voucher programs and that sort of thing, as from the state level?
Well, the unions exist, the teachers associations exist, and in full disclosure, so my husband was a teacher, my mom was a teacher. The reason that those associations are important is the legal protections that they provide to their members, because all it's going to take is for some child to say, accuse the teacher of wrongdoing, and depending on what that accusation is, it could be, that teacher's career could be over. I mean, trying to, and so the legal protections that those associations provide to the members are very important. And so now, to the extent that they have become a lobbying, I guess, arm of the Democratic Party, do I agree with that? No. Absolutely not. Do they serve a function to advocate for the teacher, advocate for their working conditions, advocate for their legal protections? That's what they're supposed to do. So to the extent that that's what the role is, I think they're necessary. Now, in terms of school vouchers, I don't have a problem with that. In school choice, I don't have a problem with that. I think parents ought to be able to decide if their local public school isn't cutting it, maybe their kid has got a huge interest in being a musician or in the sports, or maybe it's a religious reason or whatever. That's, I don't have a problem with that. It's important to encourage that, because public schools may not meet that choice. But I don't see it as an either or, like we either offer vouchers or we have public schools. I think it's both. And so I think we need to also be encouraging the changes that we want to see in our public schools as well, because that's really realistically, particularly if you live in a rural area, where else are you going to go if you live in Tonopah than your local public school? So let's make sure that it's offering the best curriculum that it can.
What in the legislature can be pursued to help address crime and public safety? What steps can be taken?
To address crime and public safety, I think definitely emphasis on the training and the equipment and the recruitment that our law enforcement or first responders or dispatchers have available to them. As with anything, public safety, those careers are labor intensive. So I'm going to make sure that we have a qualified talent pool from which to draw, and some of that is pay and benefits, so we need to be looking at that. But also, I think with the growth of AI, with logistics, there are software programs out there, and I know this from my experience when I worked at Department of Public Safety, that do the predictive analytics of here's where crime or incidents are more likely to occur, so can we saturate those areas? Can we, work, use some of the technological solutions to help with enforcement? And then, just trying to change the narrative that's been out there since the 2020s of law enforcement is bad and, cops are bad. And this whole narrative, I think, has been such a detriment in really getting the cops back out in the community and fostering positive relationships so that the narrative starts to change around what I think is a very noble career and people go into with noble intentions, and it's just been sadly turned on its head in the last several years.
And turning to some fiscal responsibility questions, what will you do to ensure taxpayer dollars are used efficiently?
Well, I definitely, to look at taxpayer dollars being spent efficiently, I mean, we first need to look at what the requests are that are coming in. And, that starts with the governor's recommended budget, which historically the legislature changes very little, maybe only 1% to 2% change every legislative session. So, the legislature looks very heavily at what the governor recommends, and then the legislature goes from there. Now, looking at when each agency comes before the legislature to pitch its budget request, that's really where the legislature has a duty to get into the details of how badly do you really need the thing, or if you already asked for the thing and been denied in the past, can you get by with less of the thing? But it shouldn't just be a blank checkbook. I think we need to get back to what are the fundamental things that government is supposed to do versus what is the ask. So, and that will be what I would be looking at.
Do you support lowering taxes for individuals and businesses? And if so, how would you offset lost revenue?
What are we talking about? Like property taxes? What kind of taxes? Sales taxes?
Sure.
What?
Tell
We
us,
have no.
Tell us about your position on taxes.
Well, like anybody, do I like to pay taxes? No. Do I want to pay more taxes? No. Are they a necessary evil to fund some of the services that the Nevadans have determined are necessary? Yes. So, but my first, I guess to answer your question, my first go-to is not going to be, well, let's just raise a tax. My first go-to is going to be, what is the justification? And I don't believe it should be a top-down approach. I don't have a problem, but it needs to go to a vote of the people. If the residents of District 40 or the residents of the state of Nevada collectively say, yes, we agree to this particular tax should be raised, well, to me, that's the will of the people. But I don't think it should just come down unilaterally from the legislature if now everybody's just going to have a tax increase because we need to fund this thing. I think it ought to go to a vote of the people.
And do you consider a fee a tax?
It depends. So, not necessarily. So, for example, the fees that you pay for the Department of Wildlife fund hunter education programs. They fund the guzzlers out there for the wildlife. They fund, the counts and the population things that they do. If the hunters themselves agree that, hey, we would like this fee to be increased because we want NDOW to provide more services, I don't think that's a bad thing. If the people that are going to pay the fee agree, we want to pay more of the fee because we want more of the service. So I think it's situation dependent.
Okay. So in the legislature, you're going to run across bills proposed mostly by Democrats with on gun rights and gun control. And so where do you stand on those issues, and how much do you how strong are you on your position on the measures that should be in place for gun control?
Well, I will say I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. It's foundational to our Constitution. I was the division administrator over the division that did the background checks for firearm purchase, the Brady unit. I know why those provisions were put into place, and I don't have a problem with the existing structure where if you are a convicted felon, if you are mentally ill, adjudicated mentally ill, you've renounced your citizenship, the Brady disqualified. I don't have a problem with those. Where I have a problem is things like, the red flag laws, where, we're just going to unilaterally decide that you're a danger to without your due process. The bill that was crammed through in the 2019 session, the universal background check bill, where that you two decide that you're going to go exchange a gun and now you got to go down to Sportsman's and do a background check. That just infringes, I think, on the law-abiding citizens, because they're the ones that are going to follow it, because they're going to follow the law anyway. So I don't know that it really has had an appreciable impact on crime and those sorts of things. So, anything that tries to infringe on that, I take very seriously.
And a lot of states are adopting constitutional carry laws. If somebody had brought a bill to the floor to do that, would you support that? Would you be hesitant on that, or what was your thoughts on that?
On constitutional carry, I'm not a fan of, just because with my background in working with law enforcement, it's very scary for the men and women of law enforcement when they do a traffic stop, when they encounter somebody. It just makes their job all that much harder. And they have testified to that in prior legislative sessions. And, with my working with the law enforcement community, that's just where I don't think it's that big a burden. We're a shall issue state. So I don't think it's that big of a burden to go ahead and get the permit. And then at least it gives the law enforcement maybe only just a half second head start when they're doing a traffic stop. But that's why. I mean, I understand the argument, but I also am very sensitive to the concerns of law enforcement.
Moving on to healthcare. Should the legislature be doing anything to improve access to healthcare in District 40, and if so, what?
Yes. That short answer is yes. One of the things that I think will help is licensure reciprocity. So we've tried in several, the legislature's tried in several legislative sessions to pass the nurse licensure compact. So if you're a nurse in good standing in, say, Utah, and you come to Nevada, you wouldn't have to start the process anew as if you'd never been licensed before. That would be part of, that would be one of the reasons to pass that, and I think would increase the availability, because we rank at the bottom, in the number of medical providers, nurses per 100,000 population. So that would definitely help. I think we need to look at the Medicaid reimbursement rate that we're looking, because I know the medical providers are complaining about it, and they're right. I mean, they can't cover their expenses at the rate at which Medicaid is reimbursing. Having said that, I do think we ought to audit the Medicaid rolls, just given the fraud that we've seen in the other states. I think we'd be naive to think that perhaps that type of fraud is not occurring in Nevada. Now, is it to the scale that we're seeing in Minnesota or some of these other states? I don't, maybe not, hopefully not. I think we need to look at it. But looking at things to answer your question, licensure reciprocity, looking at the Medicaid rate, looking at the curriculum that they're offering at our med schools. Studies show that if our medical graduates can complete their residencies in the state where they graduate from, go to school, they're more likely to stay. Well, we don't have that many residency programs. That's why a lot of our graduates leave. So, I mean, we can look at some things like that as well to increase availability.
Thank you.
Moving on to immigration. What policies do you support regarding immigration as they affect Nevada's available workforce and communities, and how would you police the illegal immigration issue?
Well, I will say, first of all, I am so thankful that this administration came in and turned off the spigot of people illegally crossing the border. I think that has been hugely helpful. One of the things that we could do is enact E-Verify. That is a system where, as an employer, you could check the real-time status of a person's legal authorization to work in the United States. It has been proposed but not gotten a hearing. in the last couple of legislative sessions with the Democratic-controlled legislature, but that might be one more tool in the toolbox to look at that. And then I think, really educating the employers. So my daughter-in-law's family is from the Philippines, and they have come over legally, and they have gone through the class, and they've taken the test, and yeah, it's taken some time, but it's not insurmountable. And it really irks me that, they're coming over, they're doing everything right, and somebody else just wants to walk over our border and cut in line. When, we should be encouraging the legal way. And then I think we need to be looking at, in terms of the federal system, whether they ever fix it or not. But, what skill set can these people bring? And really taking a look. Will they be a benefit to our country? Will they contribute to our society? Or will they be a drain on the society?
Very good.
How do you, I'm actually going to go to that one. What do you hope to accomplish during your first term in District 40? And you mentioned the Democratic-controlled assembly. How do you plan to achieve your goals?
What I hope to accomplish, again, is being a strong advocate for our public safety, for our law enforcement, our first responders, our dispatchers, and I really would like to look at building that, at least starting or building on a bridge to the trades. I think, I think the nurse licensure compact, I would love to be able to get that across the finish line. That one does have bipartisan support, and both the Dems and the Rs have proposed nurse licensure in the past legislative sessions. How do things get accomplished in the legislature? Well, they have to cooperate, and you have to work across the aisle. Sometimes that rubs people wrong, or we should never cooperate with the Dems, or we should never. Well, you can take that approach, but you're not going to get your bills enacted. So you have to be able to work cooperatively and build consensus, and I feel that's something that I, throughout my career, have been very good at doing. Of let's start with what we can agree on and then build from there, as opposed to start with the can'ts. And that would be how I would intend to move legislation.
And so as a Republican, as people run, it's a partisan office, obviously. So when you say that you're a Republican, people will hear that and they'll go, well, I know kind of where this person stands on things, just by basing whether you have a D or an R in front of your name, right? So given that, is there anything that you can think of that maybe from our platform or in general about a Republican position that you're not quite 100% sure you agree with, or you would change slightly, and if so, why?
Well, I understand the attack on the public schools. The thing that bothers me, I guess, with that, just again coming from my family background, I've seen my mom, my husband give up every summer, give up my whole childhood. My mom took classes every single evening to further her education, move up in order to be able to get pay raises. Those teachers work very, very hard. And a lot of times I think they're demonized. And I think what the public does not understand is that they are required to take children from every walk of life, every socioeconomic status. They don't get the luxury of telling the parents of a severely disabled kid, we're not going to take your kid. Or that kid has the right to be in the least restrictive environment possible. That means even if that kid is disruptive to the 30 other kids in that classroom, that kid has a right to be there. The private schools don't have to deal with that. Some of the charter schools don't have to deal with that, but the public schools do. If that kid has been a disciplinary pain in the ankle for and they've tried private, they don't have to take that kid, but the public school does. you know, and the homeless children, and there's so many pressures. I think, and so I think they've done a disservice in a lot in demonizing teachers and the profession. That I don't agree with. Do I agree with parents should have the right to choose the best educational environment for their child? Absolutely, 100% I do. But to say a whole, you know, swath of the public schools are awful and that's the reason, that's not fair, you know, given what they're having to deal with.
So we obviously represent the Carson City Republicans. Why should Carson City Republicans in particular support your candidacy? And if you'd like, what distinguishes your philosophy from those of your opponents?
The Carson City Republicans should support my candidacy because I can be, and I want to be of service, and I can be and will be effective on day one. There's not a learning curve there. I know the process. I'm not going to spend the first few weeks of what am I doing, and oh my gosh, and where's the bathroom, where's my office, and you know, I bring a lot to the table to be effective. I've got the qualifications to do this job, and I feel like I'm the best qualified person to do this job. In terms of my opponents, I've been spending more time on my campaign and not really researching theirs. I will see though there is at least one individual in this race. I think the motivations for him running, I think are more focused. I think it says more about him and what he's trying to accomplish as opposed to what he wants to do for the residents of the district. I want to make the district better. I want to make this overall state a better place to be and to work and to live, and not because I have an axe to grind. So I just want to be effective. I love this community. I've lived here since 1995 with my family. We've raised our sons here. It's very much a part of me, and I would love to make it better.
And lastly, do you have any questions of us? And then two, we've covered a wide range of topics, but is there anything that we've missed that you want to talk about or that you want to get into?
No, I think you guys had a pretty comprehensive list. So.
Okay. Well, that concludes it, and thank you very much for coming, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.